Hi, I'm Cyndi O'Meara. I've been a nutritionist for 40 years. I started studying nutrition in 1980 at the University of Colorado. I've seen a lot of nutrition trends come and go. We've got low fat, high carb. There's also low carb, high fat. There's paleo, there's keto. But the trend at the moment seems to be vegan. And what I'd like to present to you is going vegan going to save our health, the planet, and animals? Because most people become vegan because they want to save the planet or they want to save animals, or they don't like the cruelty that's happening to animals. And maybe they're looking at increasing their health and their energy. So I want to present you with some information that may help you make that decision. But if you are a vegan and you are very happy with being a vegan, I then want to present what are the foods that we should be eating. Should we be eating these plant-based proteins that seem to be coming up in all grocery stores, in fridges? Should we be eating those, or is there something else that we should be looking at? So if you stay tuned, I'll give you the facts and we'll be able to understand what is happening and why is this trend towards becoming vegan. The food industry is very heavily invested into it. Billions of dollars have been invested into it. So why is this happening? Like I said, we become vegan probably to save three things: our health, animals, and the planet. So let's talk about those things. But before I do, I want to give you a little bit of a history of my eating. So I was brought up in a household where my mother made everything from scratch. But at the age of 13, 14, I said to my mum, after coming home from camp and being fed revolting meats, my mother was an amazing cook, I came home and I said, Mum, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And so she would serve up to me everything but the meat. And I was a vegetarian right up until the age of 28. And in hindsight, I look back at that time and I realized that my health wasn't the best. So I had lost my cycle. I started to gain weight. I would become very tired. And everything pointed to I wasn't well. But I never thought that my vegetarian diet was what was keeping me unwell. It wasn't until at the age of 28, I became pregnant and I had a real craving for meat. And so I started to consume meat in small amounts at first and good quality meats. And I started to eat it again. And I can look back now and realize it wasn't the best for my health. But that was 16 years. I want to talk to you firstly about the history of eating. And if you've watched my videos before, you will know I always go there. And the other thing I go to is a principle, a philosophy called vitalism. So I'm going to put those two in perspective and the vegan way of eating. So let's look at history and eating throughout the ages. So if we look at extreme climates, you will note that the people that live in extreme climates, that still live in extreme climates today, mainly eat meat. So let's take the Inuits in Greenland or even further up. And what they consume is a lot of blubber, liver, and in the summer they will eat plant-based foods. If you take people in the desert regions, such as the Himba in Namibia, they live in a desert, there's not a lot of rain there, although last year there was a lot of rain and they did have a lot more carbohydrates, but they are herders and they eat dairy produce as well as older animals. So they will have a feast on an animal, but it's not as much as when they're eating the dairy produce of it. If we go to the middle of the planet, so near the equator, where the sun is always shining, there's lots of rain, there's lots of plant matter, we actually see that there are tribes that still exist today, such as the Dani and the Lani in Papua New Guinea, that have a diet that is 90% plant-based and 10% animal-based, and they could be rodents or insects. We also can see the Catawbas. The Catawbas also live on the equator. They live on an island in Papua New Guinea or near Papua New Guinea. And these people also eat a lot of carbohydrates, but fish is a big part of their diet as well. And then we can go to the Hindu of India, who live on the equator, that were also vegetarians for 5,000 years successfully. But they ate animal produce as well. So the cow was sacred. They would eat dairy. They would also eat and with that they would make cheeses and lassies and butters and ghees and yogurts and foods that were produced by the animal that they would also use. But they never killed the animal, they didn't eat meat. But if we go to the Indians in the Himalayas, we will see that they do eat meat. So it depended on where we lived as to what kind of diet we had. So it also all depended on adaptation. And we had to adapt to that environment, to the food that was around. And as humans, we are incredible at adapting. We can adapt to whatever environment we're in and to whatever food was available to us. And that's in the natural environment. But we don't so much live in a natural environment anymore. We can go to the grocery store and we can purchase 24/7, 365 days of the year food. Food from America, like I live in Australia. I was actually at the grocery store, my little local IGA, and I noticed there were peaches and nectarines. This is winter here. And I noticed there were peaches and nectarines and I'm thinking, where did they come from? Product of USA. So wherever I am, at any grocery store, I can actually purchase these types of foods. So we don't have to adapt to whatever's in our environment. We don't have to choose our local foods. We can choose anything from around the world. But it's incredible that when you walk down the aisle, it's all packaged. And if you flip it over and you read the ingredients, you realize that those ingredients could be coming from anywhere around the world, could be coming from land-based, plant-based places around the world, or could be coming from a chemical laboratory. And I'm going to talk to you more about that as we continue. So in a way, we're very fortunate that these foods are available, but are they for our health? Are they for the planet? And are they good for the animals as well? So that's the historical perspective. I've taken you from, the history of eating right through to modern day eating. Now what I want to do is talk to you about the vitalistic approach when we look at eating a vegan-based or a plant-based diet versus having some meat in the diet. So a lot of the questioning is around the amino acids and the proteins. So when I was a vegetarian, I learnt that you had to mix foods together, plant-based foods together, in order to get the amount of the amino acids. So you had all the amino acids that would then be a complete protein. So I learnt that if I was making up a lentil dish, I had to make it with a grain or a nut. And so you did all these combinations. And if you look at the Hindu and how they ate, they always combined the nuts, the legumes, and the rices. So this is the way that I ate. The only plastic protein that was out there when I was a vegetarian was something called TVP, textured vegetable protein. And I want you to know that most of the plant-based meats that you see out there, or the plant-based dairies, is very much based on that textured vegetable protein. But what they've done is they've become really, really good at making you think the food tastes like meat, looks like meat, smells like meat, or dairy, or whatever it is you're eating, but actually isn't. They've become masters of disguise and doing this with the chemicals. So first of all, we looked at the proteins and the amino acids. I can tell you now that there is a big difference between plant-based amino acids and even in combination to meat-based protein. Because remember, meat has protein, plants have amino acids. So that's the first thing. Then there is the fiber and the fat that we need to look at. So plant-based always says, oh, there's so much fiber and we need fiber. Yes, we do. We need fiber for the microbiome. But it's not the be-all and end-all. If we're giving all that fiber to the microbiome and not feeding the body, then we have a real issue. I read a book by somebody that I really admire, and it was called Vegetarianism Explained by Natasha Campbell McBride. She started the GAPS diet, and she explained that we eat meat products or dairy or animal-based products for our human cells. And we eat plant-based products mainly for our microbiome. Both are important. Remember, we are 10% human and we are 90% microbes. We need to feed both. And there is crossovers, most definitely. But that is what she believed is that what we needed to do was be consuming both. But like I said, I was a vegetarian, I was still eating animal-based foods, but just not the meat. So that's the fiber part of it. And then there's the fat. So animal-based fats and fish-based, things like that, we can get our omega-3s in there. Whereas in plant-based fats, we also get omega-3s, but we have to translate those omega-3s into, say, EPA and DHA. And in order to do that, we must make sure we've got all the micronutrients. We have fat-based vitamins in meats, and we have fat-based vitamins in plants. For instance, inchi is very high, and that's a South American seed. It's very high in omega-3s, about 48%. It's also high in amino acids, and it has wonderful vitamin E and vitamin A within it. Animals like liver and things like that also have these fat-based vitamins or fat-soluble vitamins. What about water-soluble vitamins? Yes, we get lots of water-soluble vitamins within our plant-based foods, but we also have the ability to make these fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins through the body. If our microbiome is working really well, that will make vitamin B. It will also make vitamin K. We also know the body makes vitamin D. But having an overall approach to these foods, a vitalistic approach to these foods. And remember, vitalism is you have an innate intelligence within your body. Give it the right ingredients, it will do the best it can for you. And remembering the history is that if you lived on the equator and you had all those beautiful plant-based foods available to you, the likelihood of you being plant-based is far better than if you lived in, say, Melbourne, Victoria. It's harder. You've not got the sunshine. Sunshine is really important for your health when you're plant-based. When you're animal-based, you don't need as much sunshine. Interesting fact. So also the availability of minerals. So in plants, the minerals are bound up for the plant in things called phytates. And these phytates, if they're not broken down properly, will just stay within the plant and possibly you won't absorb them. Whereas animal-based minerals actually are not bound up and we are able to use them. There's a big difference between heme iron and plant iron. Our absorption of heme iron is far greater than our absorption of plant-based iron. But what's interesting is this, is when you have heme iron, like meat, and then you put plants with it, it even enhances the amount of iron, the heme iron that you are able to absorb. So we must look at food vitalistically rather than looking at, well, this food's got all the amino acids, it's got all the minerals, it's got all of this, but how does your body digest it is what is the most important thing. How does it absorb it? How does it utilize it? And when we look at food on the outside of our body as opposed to on the inside of our body, it's a completely different story. And so to say that this food is exactly the same as this, but this is plant-based and this is meat-based, you will see that it's very different when it enters our body and what needs it, whether it's your human cells or whether it is the microbiome. If we do become vegan and we all become plant-based, then we're going to have a lot of monocultures throughout the world. We're going to need soya, like legumes. We're also going to need grains. These are the mainstays of being vegan. And when we do have these monocultures, we have to consider the agricultural principles that are now being used with monocultures. So let's just take soya. Soya is genetically modified. It's Roundup ready genetically modified, which means this, is that we can plant soya and we can throw Roundup on it, which is based on glyphosate. We can throw all of these chemicals on it and it'll never die. But what is that Roundup doing to the soil? What is that Roundup doing to us? What is glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, doing to the ecology of the soil and the ecology of our gut? They're very similar. They're both soil-based, they're both microbe-based, they both give us the minerals we need, the vitamins we need. So when we are spraying these chemicals on these plant-based foods, and they will be within either parts per billion or parts per million within those foods, what is it actually doing to both? Let's first look at the land. When we sterilize the land, and we do that with Roundup and glyphosate, and this is just one chemical. I could be talking about dicamba 2,4-D, which they've now made genetically modified dicamba ready. They've made genetically modified 2,4-D ready. I could be, talking about any chemicals, but I'm just choosing one because this is the one that I know the most about. So we know it has a patent for being a chelating agent, draws minerals out of solution. We also know it has a patent for being a herbicide, kills plants. And it has a patent for being an antibiotic. So when you spray it on the ground, it kills the ecology of the soil. That's all the microbes in the soil, all the fungi in the soil, all the communication systems in the soil. When we do that, we lose the organic matter in the soil. When we do that, we're not able to hold water in the soil. And when we don't hold water in the soil, we can't capture that carbon. So without all of those things, we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. We're losing water into the ocean and soil, by the way, because it becomes desertified, the soils. And as a result, we basically are raping and pillaging our land. So what is it doing to our body when we consume it?